Let's face it, there's no solution to housing project abandonment. We just have to prevent it from happening. The BTS 1090 concept is a far safer mode of home delivery system, and the government should, without further delay, compel the housing industry to adopt the system, as we believe it will drastically, if not totally, eliminate cases of housing projects being abandoned. Not only house buyers suffer in an abandoned housing project, the banks and the government also suffer these devastating effects of abandonment. The grave injustice to naive and innocent house buyers is to end up being a victim of an abandoned housing project. It is a traumatic experience having to endure a situation where you place your entire saving to own a home, only to discover that the house never got completed, and worse, you still have to service the bank loan. Your life is screwed. In my earlier episode 7, I elaborated on the lack and lax in enforcement program weakens our house buyers' entitlement, where we look at some of the existing stringent rules and safety net. They are already within the existing law. And in episode 8, I highlighted abandonment. One abandoned housing project, far too many. And the consequence of an abandoned project to home buyers, bridging financiers and the government. Today, I want to talk about BTS 1090 concept being a far safer mode of home delivery system, and the government should, without further delay, compel the housing industry to adopt the system, as we believe it will drastically, if not totally, eliminate cases of our housing projects being abandoned. Don't have the wrong perception that it is an absolute build and sell, BTS. In an absolute BTS, the developer cannot sell, and unless the house is completed in totality. Under our hybrid BTS 10:90 concept, developer may sell the product before they commence construction when all the necessary approvals have been obtained. This BTS 1090 concept is where the house buyers only pay 10% deposit for the property, sign the sale and purchase agreement, and wait for the entire construction to be completed in totality before the balance 90% is paid to the housing developer when the keys with water and electricity is connected and ownership papers being title deed are available. Abandoned housing project in the country continues to be a dampener to the hopes of many house buyers and their families from realizing their dream of being owner of their own homes. Its continued presence remains a thorn in the housing industry that does not bode well for the well-being of the affected house buyers, nor the reputation of the Ministry of Housing and Local Government as a regulatory body and approving authorities. Besides causing dilapidated environment, abandoned projects also cause unnecessary hardship to many people as they need to continue with their monthly bank installment for their housing loans. And in many cases, unless the project is successfully revived, there will be no end in sight as to how long they have to bear their ordeal. There is no solution for abandoned housing project, save and except to seek out the intervention of the government using taxpayers' money and so-called white knight to rescue those abandoned projects. The government should draw a roadmap to achieve this objective. Many countries in the region has adopted BTS 1090 concept, so there is no reason why local developer cannot do likewise. Even our big developers going overseas adopt BTS 1090 model in Australia and UK. The risk of abandoned projects is thus totally removed. If construction of the houses is disrupted or abandoned, developer will be the one to bear the brunt. Quality of houses will also improve with the build and sell 1090 system because developer will have to execute greater care to ensure they are constructed in accordance with the specification and proper workmanship so that the finished product are saleable. Now, with BTS 1090 concept, housing developers will be more careful with their money and will not be reckless as in the current system. The National House Buyers Association have urged the previous government to make good the implementation of a BTS 1090 system as the industry's housing delivery mode from the year 2015. We had previously urged the government not to deviate from the original roadmap to mandatorily implement the Build and Sell 1090 put in place under the Housing Development Control and Licensing Act and Regulation. That the law has already been amended to adopt the BTS 1080 concept since the year 2012 with the introduction of Schedule I and Schedule J, Sale and Purchase Agreements. This BTS 1090 concept was reiterated in the National Housing Policy Dasar Perumahan Negara tahun 2018 hingga 2025. Now let me take you back to a little bit down memory lane. The then government had in the year 2012 reiterated in Parliament that the Build and Sell 1090 system will be made mandatory by the year 2015, but said the then incoming minister made a U-turn. Until now has not seen daylight. He had proposed to allow Build and Sell 1090 system to coexist with the Sell Then Build concept and that the developers were allowed to choose. Now this is akin to allowing the housing developers a free rein again. This has drawn the flank and adverse criticism of the house buying public and the Consumer Association, especially the victims of abandonment and the victims of those unlicensed developers, and whether the government will hold true to their slogan, Janji ditepati, or promises fulfilled. Now back to our subject. Under the Build and Sell 1090 system, house buyers only need to fork out the initial payment of 10% where booking a house and do not need to make any further payment until vacant possession of the property is delivered to them. As such, the servicing of the end financing loan do not kick in until the houses are completed with all the certifications obtained and keys with vacant possession are presented to the buyers. The government abandonment project revival effort do not seem to be able to match or counterbalance the fresh problematic projects that have been labelled as lewat, delayed, or sakit, sick, that continues to come in online. This is precisely why the government is encouraging it and offering incentive to developers who opt to adopt this mode of selling their product. But it fell short of compelling the industries to adopt this BTS 1090 concept concurrently. HBA now urged the current government to make BTS 1090 mandatory for all new housing projects to safeguard the interests of the rakyat and to eliminate the scourge of abandoned housing projects. Perhaps the government will consider a gradual phase-in period, i.e. 1. BTS 1090 mandatory for affordable housing category in the year 2023. 2. Subsequently, 50% BTS 1090 concept to be adopted for all housing development by the year 2024. By the year 2025, all housing developments mandatorily adopt the BTS 1090 concept. Any housing project can either succeed or fail. And since the success or failure of any housing project cannot be guaranteed by any party, it is only fair for the people to expect the government to initiate a system that totally or to a large extent insulate house buyers from such business risks or such uncertainties. Even car buyers have more protection than house buyers. Has anyone ever heard of a person who bought a car and never got the car? Do you not know that car manufacturers have better quality control as compared to construction, which we have not?
Time to unleash the beast.
Before one, the possibility of a spike in distressed and problematic project post-pandemic cannot be discounted. Many will now experience cash flow hiccups. There are numerous questions on my laptop of complaints by victims of abandoned project, which I will reply by email. But I wish to read out an interesting question from a banker financier of the current system of Sell Then Build. Now, Dr. Cheng, I'm a banker and I know the advantages of your Build and Sell 1090 concept and how it closed the floodgate of future possibility of abandoned housing project. Could you enlighten the listeners on the benefit to the banking industry? Can you also enlighten on the argument that house prices will go up tremendously as claimed by housing developers? Basically, the BTS 1090 creates a more orderly system of financing in that banks give project financing to developers and buyers are not subjected to this early stage financing. House buyers pay only 10% upon entry. Project financing covers only the construction and the incidental costs. Developers' profits are not factored in. Rightly so, as developers should collect their profit only upon completion of the project. This will also have a stabilizing effect on house prices because banks would want developers to show proof of committed sales in the form of percentage before they could approve or release the project financing via tranches. Hence, house prices would be placed at a realistic and a current value in order to secure sales. overpriced houses will not sell, and this would be a big problem with regards to getting bank approval for project financing. With the safer system created by the BTS 1090s, banks may even consider lowering interest as cases of abandonment will be largely diminished and correspondingly bad loans within the housing industry will be reduced. Currently, the large amount of abandoned projects in the country is tying up large amount of dormant funds. When this is reduced, financing costs can also reduce and the industry will benefit. On the argument that house prices will go up, the developer claimed that house prices will jump many folds is based on the wrong premise that the industry will sink. This point has long been one of the frighteningest of fear tactics touted by vested parties. It is best a conjecture without any solid justification. It is a wrong premise intentionally adopted by the opponents of the Build and Sell 1090 model. This wrong premise is that in the current system of a sell then build, the buyers are the one financing the housing industry. Hence, the argument is that if you take away this financing by the buyers, the industry will surely collapse. This is not true. It is the financial institutions that are financing the housing industry. The housing industries and financing go hand in glove. Even big cash-rich developers conduct their businesses using financing and not entirely from their in-house funds. This has to do with leveraging, risk spreading, and taxation. Currently, under the Sell Then Build, bank lend money to house buyers and these funds are then channeled to pay developers. The risk to bank is that if the houses are not completed, assuming the project fails, for whatever reason, buyers become defaulters. When one project fails, there are perhaps hundreds of defaulters. Revival of any abandoned project becomes very problematic within a legal quagmire. This is due primarily to the situation that when any failed project, there are multiple banks that have given end financing loans to the buyers. The collateral is held by multiple banks, with such holding multiple lien to the various lots. Hence, the bank also suffer losses. Buyers may become bankrupt. Developers hide behind their corporate veil and often escape using crafty corporate maneuvers. Banks are left holding collaterals that have little or no cashable value unless the revival effort is successful. Whereas in the Build and Sell 1090 system, the bank deals only with the developer and the parcel of land remains wholly within the control of the project financing bank. Unlike the present situation where no particular bank has control over the multiple lots under development, the land is fragmented. In fact, with the bank operating within the less riskier environment, it will encourage more willing financing from them. The Association of Banks has constantly stated that they do not discriminate between big or small property developers or whether it's sell then build or build and sell 1090 concept. Their main criteria is viability, feasibility, and marketability of any projects. Here lies another advantage of the Build and Sell 1090 in that there is another audit put in by the project financing bankers before a project is launched. Chances of project abandonment is further trimmed. With more orderly system, the housing industry will be more stable and stronger. Banks will be operating in the safer and lower risk environment due to the more logical structure of financing the industry. Even the bridging financier could exclusively offer end financing facility for buyers in a particular scheme. Let me offer you 4 observations on what I've spoken. Firstly, developer now has to factor in the interest into the cost of the product. But this interest should cover only the construction cost and is also not a one-time outright payoff. The onus is on developers to complete their project as early as possible in order to minimize their finance costs. Hence, cases of delay will be reduced. Secondly, developer will now be more careful when embarking on the development, obviously because they're now using their own money as compared to inattentive when using people's money. Thirdly, buyers are already paying the unseen costs by way of progress payment interest even before the houses are completed. Thus, any price increase brought about by developers having to carry their finance costs will be offset by the savings on progressive interest. Fourthly, within this safer system of financing, banks should be more willing to support the industry with cheaper financing costs. This will certainly have a positive effect on supply and pricing. Those banks who are on the same wavelength with us will obviously concur with us. Even this BTS 1090 concept is in the bank syllabus and is subject in the course of teaching. Thank you for the excellent questions. My next talk will be on new doesn't mean perfect. Just when you thought you bought a new house, apartment, condominium, you then are faced with issues that relates to water leakage nightmare, shoddy workmanship, and substandard materials. What are your legal recourse and options? I will elaborate in my next video. See you in the next episode. Cheers.